And we are live with our 166th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. Ken and I are excited to be here. There's a lot to cover today. There's been a lot that's happening in the industry and in the world that's related to security. So, there's quite a bit that we do want to discuss today. Please join the Slack or the YouTube comments section in order to get your view in and also ask any questions. But before we jump into that, Ken and I will be in Omaha next week for KernelCon. There are still a couple of seats available for that training course. If you are interested, last minute to jump in, please do. Otherwise, there will be an opportunity at the end of June to take the course publicly at Locomocosec, some mythical conference that exists out on an island somewhere. I think we have to apparate to get there or something like that, right? I don't know. Anyway, so we will be teaching at both of those conferences. And it feels like travel is picking back up. I'm sure there'll be other stuff that will get dropped on the calendar. If you have a conference, if you have a B-Sides event that does training, offers training that you would like us to teach at, just let us know. We're more than happy to submit CFTs or we just want to kind of spread the love with the secure code review stuff. It helps all of us and it helps the industry be better. So there's a reason that we do it, outside of the fact that we like to see people and, at least for me, right, Ken, I'm ready to get back out there and, just push it. It feels like it's been a long time. So it's time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I also have I have an idea for some add-on training that I felt like was around static source code review for in terms of an incident response focus. So we'll chat more about that because that's something that kind of has been really relevant. I think there's some lessons learned and that we could share there as well. So anyways,
for sure,
we'll talk more about that.
I mean, I know in the course we always talk about there's different reviews that we do from a, kind of a defense perspective, right? There's your traditional, hey, we need a code review on this project. Here's all the code that you need to make it. There's pull request reviews where it's just, hey, this, these changes to the code, or even just yearly reviews where we're only, doing deltas, that kind of thing. But we really haven't talked about incident response reviews, right? So it would be interesting to dive into that deeper. Because I know both you and I have been asked in the past, oh crap, we've been hacked. How did they get in, right? We know it was this page, and having to comb through code and do dynamic stuff there becomes, it can become difficult, right?
Yeah. So, no, I think it's a skill set in and of itself for sure, separate from normal source code review, whether you're doing that, from a offensive adversarial bend or not. But in any case, I think it's something we can add to it, and I have some thoughts there. So we should definitely, and I know you've done a lot, so definitely something to chat about. Anyways, so next week, Omaha, Embassy Suites should be fun.
Woohoo, Embassy Suites.
So should be a good time.
Yeah, it'll be good. I mean, check out kernelcon.org for the actual track. So training is Wednesday, Thursday. That's when we'll be teaching, but we will be there Friday for the conference as well. Conference runs Friday, Saturday. And yeah, there's also some good talks and some other stuff that's going on with the conference. So we would encourage people to go. It'll be good. So speaking of which of these articles do you want to jump into first, Ken?
Oh, gosh. Let me look. We could.
You want to start with that WAF one? I think that was interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So, WAFs, web application firewalls. When these came about, this would have been, I mean, as a technology, they're not as old as like a normal firewall. They're layer 7 firewall if you're thinking about the OSI model. But basically, they started being very popular, early 2010s.
I was thinking
Mod
about it. I was trying to
Security,
remember.
Imperva. I
I
mean,
think you're right.
Imperva came out probably a little bit earlier than that, like 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there. I remember dealing with them but they became very popular, early 2010s, right? As
I
we
remember
were.
F5 too, right?
Yep. F5 has their advanced protection module or application protection, APM, something like that, right? They have a WAF module as well. But all they do is they look for signatures on a layer 7, at layer 7, not on layer 7, at layer 7. They have some enhancements to actually do, detection of various attacks. Things like SQL injection, they do a pretty good job of seeing and catching and eliminating. But then there's a whole research arm of bypassing web application firewalls that is super interesting as well. I remember the first time I ever analyzed one, Imperva, way back in the day, right? Like, granted, gray hair, whatever. Like, I remember that, the web application firewall would catch like and 1 equals 1, right? If you were trying to do like a SQL injection, but it wouldn't catch a, and with quotes around like A equals B, right? Like, or A equals A, if you put quotes around it, right? Like there were things like that in the early days. Any new technology as it comes out is obviously going to have flaws, but it was fun to like poke at those bypasses and show people how easy it was, because it's been represented as hey, you don't need to do application security if you just throw in a firewall, right? Just depend on Cloudflare, just depend on CloudFront to handle this for you, and XSS and SQL injection will no longer be a problem. You don't have to code to it, right? And so, okay, so that brings us to this article.
By the way, can I add to that? I think that it's probably, I suspect, not an issue with the engineers designing these products, but what we've seen over and over again, which is salespeople that have bottom lines to meet, that promise the world and don't actually, follow the guidance that an engineer, like, there's no way engineers are like, yeah, you just drop it in and it'll work. No, like, they know you need to set up custom rules. You need to tune it for your application. There's going to be some work done. It's not something that somebody who's uneducated in web app security should and hasn't taken any training or doesn't have any familiarity with the product should just be dropping in. And I think usually what I've seen with, and this is not just WAFs, this is just in general in this industry, I'm sure I know you've come across this where, it's like, here's the tool, that's great, but here's a bunch of promises that mean nothing and aren't true because I want to meet my bottom line as a salesperson. And it's just a disconnect between the engineering and the sales org part. And I think, like, to add also onto this is that a few years later, that was kind of the refreshing aspect of Signal Science's WAF product, in that it operated a little bit differently. But they specifically, you have very incredibly technical engineers who are also leaders of the company, selling, helping build and deploy and troubleshoot their product, whereas it wasn't like an F5 where it's a big company and you've got like that disconnect. So I think there was some around 2013, I want to say, there was a lot of like that's when Signal Sciences started really, I think, making some waves. And then shortly thereafter, then it became do you want to use a WAF or a RASP? And then there's the WAF versus RASP. So that's like the brief history, I think, in how I remember it. But that's just me.
I mean, you're absolutely right. It was, we've always had this problem in security, right? That like, hey, we're just going to throw a bunch of money at a specific tech and it's going to take care of our problems, right? There's very much this like silver bullet syndrome. that we've talked about for years. First it was, oh, all you need is a firewall. Oh, you don't actually need people to run that. We always had issues with that because of certain executives way back in the day at like the bank that I worked at, who would just go like, he'd look at the Gartner like quadrant for some new up and coming and talk to some salespeople, buy a product, and then basically walk over to the security engineers and drop a product in their lap and say, hey, we're going to start using this now. And you start looking at it, it's something like a WAF, and you're like, this takes daily care and feeding. Did you like budget for any extra, manpower? No. He just, signed a check, bought the product, and it was new and shiny. So obviously it's going to take care of all our problems. Right. And so that's not necessarily on Imperva, F5, Signal Sciences, or any of the WAF or RASP providers. It's very much a misunderstanding of how those products integrate into custom applications. And I think that's the problem we've always dealt with is you and I are product security, application security in general. We focus on custom developed applications and not necessarily COTS products. And the reason for that is because that's why a company builds or has developers is they have something that's custom that they want to put out there that's specific to their business practices, to their products, to their customers. And it's not going to get the same scrutiny as a COTS product that Oracle is building to sell to, 5,000 different organizations or Microsoft or whoever else. So, there's a reason why we spend a lot of time on that. That's all I'm trying to say. So, I'm not sure where I'm going with that.
It's just the history. I think it's important I just feel like it's important to kind of go through the history of WAPs because they're, I don't know what the current popular opinion is on them, but I know what the popular opinion was back then and why I think that popular opinion existed, that WAFs were, basically an expensive, useless tool. And I don't think I think it's, again, it's everything we're saying. It's just, you need to put the time and care into it. Also, you need to understand it's not just security that's deploying and using this product. It's going to be multiple departments. You're probably going to have to work with your SRE or op folks. You're probably going to have to work with your developers to inevitably they're going to be the ones, who have issues that surface because of, say, a WAF blocking traffic that's actually intentional and what am I trying to say? Non-malicious traffic, like normal traffic. Something will get blocked. That's pretty common. And you're going to have application developers responding to it. And so it's a multi department sort of deployment thing, right? So it's not just security that's involved, but it is typically security who's the customer and buying the product.
Yeah, one of my favorite things with a WAF, because it was okay. So PCI section 6.6 way back in the day.
How do you remember that?
Because it came up so much. But yes, I realize whatever. Okay, so back in the day, 6.6 of PCI was the application security requirement of PCI DSS, like the data security standard. And it had a couple of things that you could do. You could do a yearly application penetration test. You could or a source code review, or the third thing was you could deploy a WAF. And so I've got, okay, so what would an organization do that doesn't have contacts in the security industry, that doesn't have, right? And it was almost a coup by the WAF providers to get this inserted in PCI DSS because it drove a whole bunch of sales, which I totally get. It's totally fair. And a WAF does provide value. I'm not saying that it doesn't. But I still see this kind of compliance check that people drop into WAFs. So this article in and of itself does not surprise me, is what I'm driving at. Half of the orgs use it to paper over flaws, to hit that compliance check. How many times, I can't tell you how many times that I've looked at AWS CloudFront WAF deployments, And all it is basically IP restriction and maybe, DDoS protection. And that's it. It doesn't actually implement any of like the SQL injection, cross-site scripting, or anything else, any other rules, because those are difficult. But it's very easy to get that checkbox to say, oh yeah. We use AWS's CloudFront WAF, and you don't have to worry about it because it's already there. They're paper overing the flaws. And a well-deployed WAF can prevent exploitation of vulnerabilities that exist in code. So it's not a bad control to have, but it's just implemented in a poor manner, or when it is, or there's bypasses to it. Not having a holistic approach to your application security program will end up burning you, right? Like it'll end up costing you in the end.
Yep. 100%.
Sorry, I'm like,
now that brings us to the article, which is no. I mean, I think that's all relevant information, because it definitely plays into why this is sad, depressing, and hilarious all at the same time. Damn it, where did I somehow close the article? Why am I'm like I'm tab deficient. I don't know.
Ken, do you even computer? I don't know, right? Like, do you even cyber?
I don't cyber well. Right. So this is about half of orgs using web app firewall WAFs to paper over flaws. So the survey asked 136 IT cybersecurity. There's my favorite term again.
Cyber.
And I hate that term. For those watching who don't know, I hate that term. It's just so stupid and weird, and I don't like it. Anyways, and application development professionals from organizations across more than 20 industry verticals about their application development practices. So that's a lot of people, right? Or that's a lot of groups, 136 groups basically, or professionals. So to reduce risk to their web apps, 14% admit to using WAFs instead of patching flaws. Okay. Yeah. And 36% say they use WAFs as a temporary safeguard before getting around to patching. And that doesn't seem like a big deal to me, because think about like the first part, 14%. Yeah, it's kind of gross. You need to patch your stuff. But 36% using the WAF as a temporary safeguard, that does make sense. Like if you think about Log4j, what would be the quickest way to fix that in an instant across multiple apps deployed around your organization? Write in a rule, deny the strings that are the attack strings that are used to exploit the Log4j flaw, while you do a proper like inventory and upgrade and testing the remediation in like say staging prior to deploying to prod. Or deploying the changes to prod, that you have like a safe way to sort of like immediately cut off attacks while you do the proper longer term approach, which can take a long time. That's why I say, like, if you have something that can immediately cut off an exploit at the knees while you do the longer term stuff, that's going to take some time. That's amazing. That's great. That's fine. I think that's fine. I don't know. What are your opinions on that, Seth?
No, I mean, that's how we've always advocated use of the WAF. It's a great stopgap solution, and it's also a great, unknown unknowns attacks, right? Those are kind of the two surfaces where I see it being extremely useful. If you know about a vulnerability, you got to go fix it, right? Like I realize that there's time constraints, and I realize there's development constraints, but the longer that you leave something like that out there, the more likely that it is to get exposed or to get exploited. But it feels like that's the proper use of the WAF technology that we've advocated for so long, right? And I was trying to read through it too. Yeah, I mean, total percentage of people that use WAFs, 74% versus 72%. Like that's pretty much the same. I am encouraged that that's how. I mean, it's taken us a long way to get here, but I can pull up training texts from back in 2008 that reference, or 2009, whatever, that reference WAFs. And we always talked about, these are the shortcomings. you should use it as a stopgap solution. And I'm very certain that we used it, that we said stopgap, or that it's in that, but it's taken us a long time to the industry to really get there. And so it'll be interesting to see over time how that actually is impacted and how it grows, or if it does grow from here, or if we're kind of at like peak usage. I don't know. But I think things like RASP and signal sciences, like the better engineered WAFs probably are in use as well. I mean, I'd be interested to see what the comparison is between WAF and like RASP, and how that's actually actually being implemented. I'm sure we could get Dave back on to talk about what they see, right?
I was just thinking that,
contrast perspective. We've had Dave Lindner on the show before. I think he's the CISO over at Contrast now. But he could probably talk more to that, because I know he does. They do like state of the industry style surveys and things like that as well. And it might be useful to run that down, because it is an interesting topic to see where those trends are going.
Yeah, and here's the I'm gonna post a link to that episode where we did talk about. All right, so this here is this link that's up on your screen. That's the one for David Linder where we talk about RASPs, WAFs, and all that jazz. But I don't think now. Let me ask you this. Is there ever a time you think where patching as a stopgap could go wrong and be misused? Like, I was thinking of scenarios where it's just like you have I was going to use the word pen test. A vulnerability assessment of your application, and they come back with potentially a couple higher critical findings, and we'll say one of them's like, I don't know, SSRF or injection of some kind. Is there a time when you think it's inappropriate to rely on patching? Because they kind of say that. I mean, they almost provide it. To me, it reads almost like in a negative bend. I don't know if that's just me the way I'm reading this, but like I said, with Log4j, I actually think it's a positive thing if you use it as a temporary safeguard. But are there times where it's not? Do you think there are times where it's not a good thing to use it as a temporary stopgap? Say in a situation where it's something like what I mentioned, where it's not just like Log4j, it's actually like very specific to your custom application that you have some flaw or something like that. I see that's what they mean by patching, because you could interpret that either by like patching meaning upgrading dependencies, updating the build that you're for the OS your app runs on. You could interpret that as like the actual like I said, maybe you've introduced in your custom code SSRF and you're patching that. I don't know.
So the only condition that I would place on it is be careful where you get your rules from, right? If you're not, if the administrators that are running your WAF are not well versed in creating their own custom rules, they're probably copying those from some other place. And so I'm thinking of the situation with Log4j, and it's probably more of just like an application denial of service style exploit, or not even vulnerability. I don't want to say that, but you can denial of service your own application if you introduce rules that aren't well crafted in any firewall or any blocking technology. Most of them have wildcards built into it. They have, regular expression denial of service can happen against the WAF itself, and it can get overloaded. So you've got to be really careful with the rules that are put into place in any blocking technology. Just from a application availability perspective. So I don't necessarily see this as negative as I think the article first comes up, especially when you read that title, right? Oh, you're using it to paper over flaws. I don't think that's the case, right? My big takeaway is, they use it to mitigate risk, right?
Right.
That temporary patch solution is right in line with what I would expect. The ones that use it to to patch their flaws, that's what I'm more concerned about. Like the 50%, like what they use in the title grab there, half of orgs. No, that's not necessarily how I read that data. What I read is there's still 15 to 20% of orgs that only use the web application firewall. And that's more concerning to me, right, than the 35% or the 50% that are using it as a temporary backfill.
60% of the time it works 100% of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, there's always going to be bypasses like that. That's why I'm concerned about that 1 in 5 or the 1 in 6, that's the only solution that I have. And I mean, there's tools out there that'll identify the WAF for you, right? Like there's certain signatures you can tell based on cookies, based on header responses, other things, like what kind of WAF is actually in play, right? And I mean, not to mention IP addresses, right? Like, a cloud, you're getting blocked by a WAF. It'll give you a specific type of error message. And then you know what you're playing with and what you're trying to get around. Yeah. So I guess that was, I don't know. That was a long-winded way to say, you just got to be careful about what's being deployed.
No, I think you comprehensively, I mean, I that was a deep question. It's not an easy question to answer. So you kind of do have to go in depth on the pros and cons and when it's okay to patch and how it's okay, and unpacking these stats. Do they make sense? It is like obviously not a massive pool of. It's not a massive survey. It's 134, I think, or something like that, people that they surveyed. So, anyways, so I was curious if we got nothing else there to cover. Did you want to? I think you had mentioned something about the latest Russia cyber.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Come on, it's all NPM. That's your bailiwick now, right?
Oh yes, this stuff, right? Yeah, fun times. ProtestWare.
Open source sabotage. Huzzah! And I'm pretty sure somebody dropped it into. Yeah. Yep. Who was that? It was in our Slack channel. It actually popped up in our Slack channel from, where is it at? Now I'm missing it.
See, you're having the tab. I have tab fatigue. Let's caption that or coin that term rather.
Yeah, from Cyclops, right? And in our Slack, right? Like he dropped this in there, and we've been talking about software supply chain attacks for what it feels like forever, right? Like the last year, it's been a huge thing. We've seen it happen multiple times. We've seen takeovers. We've seen people drop packages. We've seen people introduce random crap into popular packages, like even the maintainers themselves. But at this point, we're actually looking at maintainers that are targeting Russian and Belarusian systems based on, and I haven't looked too deep in the article as far as how it's being done, like how they're doing the identification, but it's ProtestWare, right? It almost feels like we're dialing back the internet to the anarchist days of hacktivism, right? But it's through open source package maintainers that are doing it as opposed to anonymous or whoever else. But it's super interesting to actually see. And I know I know you have opinions on this, Ken. So what are your thoughts around it?
Yeah, let's start with the biggie here because I just caught it, and it's going to bother me if I don't address this. Oh man, open system preferences. Dang it! I was going to share my screen. I'll have to quit if I do that. Never mind. It's just bothering me. Here, I'll copy and paste the actual title of a link that's on the. So as I'm reading this article, Vice has its other articles on the right side, and this is a critically important thing that I need to bring up. It's not GitHub with the downcased. It's GitHub with the H upcase. This happens all the time. It's driving me nuts. This is my TED Talk. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about the proper way to spell GitHub. You know it gets under my skin. No, it's so annoying, man. It's on the site articles like Facebook, GitHub repo, spam with messages supporting repo, and they spell it wrong. Every Vice, get it together, okay? You're not spelling GitHub right. This is an important issue. Fix it. No. All jokes aside. So back to the actual issue at hand. So I think I made it somewhat clear in Slack. Like, I think this ProtestWare is so Anthony raised a good point in Slack that, I guess it's bringing some awareness to the, there's either implicit or explicit trust in the sort of like implicit trust nature of these open source dependencies. It's, I guess, bringing some awareness to the fact that we have this trust relationship with people we don't really know and with code that they've developed and all of that. And I hear that point. I think that there's other ways to go about doing that if awareness was the goal, right? That are not necessarily destructive in nature. I think it's absolute garbage to create software, get people to use it, support the community, and then decide, hey, I'm going to abuse that trust that people have put in. And keep in mind, a lot of times, and I don't know, the potential or the specific package that we're talking about here, but a lot of times it's typically multiple people that are contributing, to that. That's why it's open source, right? You have multiple contributors. It's not typically just the one person. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are often open source projects where it's just the one person who does a lot of, or the majority of developing on that. But, as a project grows and matures and it becomes, used by more and more folks, there are oftentimes scenarios where multiple developers are contributing to something. And so, like, what about those people that didn't want to, have trust broken with a package and cause, issues with people's computers and also, by the way, like the one example that we had talked about was I think the RIA Evangelist Node IPC package, where it was like, yeah, that didn't just like mess up Eastern European computers. That was like an actual like legit issue in many places outside of those locations. So this is horse shit. That's what I think of it. If you want my honest opinion, it's horse shit. Like, stop doing it. It's not a good thing. That's I guess the easiest way I can say it. But like, or the easiest way I can express my feelings on it. But
I mean, it's the law of unintended consequences, right? And it affects more than just those single package, the people that are depending on that package, because of the way that NPM works, the way that these packages are pulled into large applications that, someone may not necessarily know that they are using Node IPC, right? And which means that it's going to affect a wider swath of the population than just the target in and of itself. And so I'm with you, right? Like, and this is where it goes back to kind of the whole hacktivism / anarchy feel that I was talking about. Is, this was the sort of stuff that happened. Man, I keep dating myself this episode, Ken, but back in the back
it's all
in the
right, Grandpa. We know
exactly.
It's time for Jeopardy and tapioca
I mean,
and a nap.
Yeah, exactly. It is. I know it's
Love
time
you,
for
Seth.
dinner. It's time for dinner. So back in like the early days of the internet, it was a very popular thing to be a hacktivist and to go, deface sites, to go explore, to drop names. It's almost like tagging, right? Like it was, tagging to get your opinion out or your awareness out. Yeah, exactly. To build some rep. And it does feel a little bit like the gloves have come off over the last month. And like, we're starting to live that law of unintended consequences. It's affecting things that we didn't necessarily intend. The developer probably didn't intend for it to wipe systems that were in other places. but I'm sure that it has, because we have systems in those places that depend on like the encoding or those keyboards or whatever it is that's being targeted. And it's great to bring attention to an issue. I don't want to get around that. But it needs to be done in a way that isn't destructive. Yeah. I mean, I know the flip side to that, there could be an argument there that, if it's not destructive, that people won't realize it. But there's other ways to do that aren't as impactful to, somebody just living their life or making, being able to perform their job, or, not costing an organization millions of dollars to clean up, that kind of thing.
It's a philosophical, conversation, I guess, in a way that's similar to like peaceful versus, aggressive protests. So like burning and looting things versus, like marching and being respectful, and there's arguments on either side. But I can confidently say that this is just, it's destructive. It breeds a distrust even further, and I mean, let's be honest, trust has been obviously eroding for at least a decade, easily at least a decade, in the supply chain of software. And more is being done these days to try and, like we talked a few weeks ago, I think, about it, the company that was using behavior heuristics to thwart malicious packages from being, this would actually fall safely within that, by the way, I think. No, I don't think it's a file operation that would be override. Yeah, it should fall under, dangerous behavior. So, and then there's like software bill of material. There's a bunch of things we're doing to sort of like counteract that eroding trust in the supply chain of software. But stuff like this, man, I have a hard time. Because also, I guess, because I'm too close to it too, because I actually work with the teams that, deal with like this abuse, and they deal specifically with, NPM specifically, like everything around it, like from the vulnerabilities that are discovered in NPM to like any abuse that occurs in this fashion. And I know how it affects people and how negatively it impacts their life. And these are not bad people. These are not people that deserve that. And so sometimes, yeah, maybe I'm just too close to it and it pisses me off, but it for sure gets under my skin when this ProtestWare crap comes out. So maybe I'm just the wrong person to give an opinion on it, probably, because I'm not objective. I can safely say that.
Yeah. It's tough, right? Like it is a philosophical discussion, and I understand that change only happens when there are things that things are uncomfortable for the powers that be, right? Like that's that's part of the society that we live in. So like I get it, but it's
to a degree. But who is actually like impacted by this? Is it the people?
Well, and that's the thing. Like who is the pain actually hitting here, right? Like, did it really did it really have the intended effect? And I just keep going back to law of unintended consequences. It was a gut decision by someone to release this software, to do this within the concept of the trust that they had been given. They broke that trust. There's no taking that back, right? There's no rewinding to the point that people are going to trust that package ever again. And I would almost argue it's going to push people like us to be doing more and more reviews or source code reviews on third-party packages that are being sourced into different applications. That's the requirement. That's what's coming down the pipe. And it's going to prevent popular packages from becoming as popular as they could be, and probably negatively affecting other developers of popular packages. Again, unintended consequences, because people won't pick those up because they don't trust them, right? Like they may have some great tech in there. They may have some great coding that would help their developers. It's just this, there's waves of issues that cascade from this that aren't necessarily a part of the intended consequences, right?
Yeah. Now I see the article that Aaron posted. Some of them mentioned that article is potentially not real, and that this stuff didn't really happen, and Russian disinformation and yada yada yada. And then Aaron points out that it's not sure if it's confirmed, but there's a claim from an NGO that the last messages from soldiers detailing war crimes were lost. I don't know about any of that. I can speak, I guess, also a little bit to how does GitHub deal with that abuse. We have a pretty standard way of dealing with. There's obviously prioritization around. I can just speak to it at a high level. So we have doesn't mean this specific case, just in general, like with malicious packages, we do have an abuse team that handles things like this, and they just prioritize like how you would figure they would prioritize packages that need to be looked at to see if they need to be removed from the platform. Obviously we don't want malicious content being distributed. So they use, I'm not privy to all the metrics they use and all of that, but it's pretty, if it's a high priority, it's going to be yanked. They try to avoid that, actually, though. There's a lot that goes into the whole, and I'm going to write it down. Maybe I can get somebody from abuse to kind of speak through that.
It would be interesting, Ken, because that would be how it's actually like how the rubber hits the road there is really relevant to what's going on right now.
Right.
Because I mean, I know you guys deal with it. There's other organizations that are dealing with the same thing. And this goes to the other, right? Like the other cybersecurity news that happened this week where, the president comes out and says, oh, you better turn on your security protections now in the industry, right? Like,
yeah.
I loved
now
it was Jerry's response was like, oh, well, let me go push the security button, right? Like, let me go turn that on because we don't do that otherwise, right?
I saw that this morning and I was just like, really?
Yeah.
Great. You're really helping.
Like we haven't been targeted for the last, decade coming from. Do you want to see the logs that coming from Russia and
oh my gosh,
other places?
No, from the very day I got into security, no joke. From the very day I got into security professionally, not just like something I did in my off time for fun, China and Russia.
Yeah.
Number 1 and 2, and I don't know which one's which, they being attacked. Yeah, that's nothing new. I don't know what the point of that was, but cool. Yeah. I kind of watched it. This guy's on TV again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I feel like it was kind of a, oh, we're being targeted, right? Like, yeah, we're always targeted. Great. And I'm like, okay, but if like the amount of traffic that's coming out of Russia now, right? Like, and is probably way less than it actually was, right? Like, anyway, yeah. So there's that whole piece as well, but that feeds into the the response, right? Like, what is it that you're doing to prevent, right? Like, okay, a package gets taken over, what's the process? What actually happens? What avenues do developers have to notify package maintainers? Like, how does that actually need to happen? There's quite a bit that the ProtestWare person should know about if they see some of those packages, where they should actually turn to. I mean, NPM is, fairly well known, but even some of the other smaller package repositories, I know those guys all talk. I know you all talk with, together about maintaining security. There's got to be a good alert system, a good way to let people know that something bad is happening and, get that taken care of. So.
Yeah. No, it's sorry. What's that?
No, go ahead.
Security. Oh, like a DEF CON level. Nice. Yeah. Sorry, I'm reading the comments. Yeah, I mean, actually, a question I have for folks, if you want to give feedback on security features you'd like to see in NPM, throw that in Slack. I can't can't guarantee anything, obviously, but like we are working, to consistently improve the security of specifically npm, since that's owned by GitHub. So if you have things that you'd like to see security feature wise, feel free to share in Slack or DM me, even if you want to do that. Either way, it'd be great. But yeah, like no, so I mean, yeah, it's a pretty I gotta say, just to like pull a package, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. It's not and subsequently to like warn about it or something like that. Basically, it's a pretty big decision. It can obviously cause issues, quite a bit of issues, when you pull a package. So it's really not something that it would have to be. It is typically something drastic like this that qualifies for that. But yeah, I do think, like, as I'm getting into this, sorry, I was again reading the comments. I think it's best that I do pull in, try to pull in somebody from the abuse team to kind of cover this and make sure that we're okay to discuss certain things, publicly as well. I don't want to get myself or anyone else in hot water, but if I can do it, that's certainly something I plan on doing, is pulling in the abuse folks.
Okay.
So, but yeah, any feedback for like security things people like to see, that'd be great.
Yeah.
See what I can pass along.
Yeah. I mean, we did have that list a couple of weeks ago that we talked about, of like the things that a package maintainer can do to secure their repository, right? Like and that's, I mean, that's number one, right? Outside of, some of the other stuff that's going on and being pushed into the repository. And yeah, the amount of code that's in there is, somewhat ridiculous when you really start to think about it. I mean, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely see. I see why. Adam Baldwin had told me, when he came on board, he was like, "Man, it's been a long ride, and I see it now. I get it. It's a lot of work to secure these package ecosystems.
Yep.
It's a labor of love for sure. So cool. So do we have anything else we want to talk about on that front?
No, I don't.
We got
think so.
7 minutes left. I figure we could probably fit in one more topic before we hop off.
Yeah, I know, like we kind of teased out that we were going to talk about passwords last week, but I think that's a bigger discussion than the 7 minutes that we have left today. So maybe we talk about that new Apple Safari CSP stuff, right?
Throwing it in right now.
Okay.
To Slack. Yeah, there's some changes. Pull one text to PDF node package and half the internet goes down.
Yeah.
There was actually like a PDF, HTML to PDF vuln I'd seen patched, actually, speaking of recently, but I can't remember all the detail. It might even be on the Daily Swig site is where I might have seen that. But in any case, yeah, so Apple Safari empowers developers. Okay, so this one, it's interesting, and I have thoughts, because I have to be honest, I've definitely heard from folks who are privy to like the W3C world that Apple has typically in the past been a bit difficult to they want to do their own proprietary things more often than not. And so getting them to like go with a standard that all browser folks agree with and that can become a standard, and getting Apple to actually like follow the standard as it was conceptualized has been an issue in the past. I don't know if that's still the case, but this is an example of Apple doing a few things here. One thing I thought was really interesting. So they've got support here for CSP3. So I remember Neil talking about how he used you have a report URI, you can get reports for CSP failures, and he had tried to do that, but it was so much information and it was so noisy that he's like, I'm convinced there's no way that it's ever going to be or in its current iteration or current form, it's not going to be useful, right? It's just going to get too many reports and all of that. But one thing they've added here is the ability to give a directive for report samples. So you get supposedly you get a pretty succinct error from when, CSP goes wrong, right, or right, depending on how you look at it, and blocks something. So it gives you a nice little sample report, and it's supposed to be more actionable, basically less nonsense being sent, and just a better way to collect metrics. So that I'm actually really interested to hear about. Like, obviously, it's going to take probably a few months for people to get this in. Get this change into their apps, and then get a decent amount of metrics collected, and then some analysis done. So I expect that's going to take at least 3 to 6 months, I would imagine. But I would be curious to follow up with folks that actually had implemented that report sampling for CSP, and to see if it actually, they found it to be useful. So that's one of the big things I took away from this that was super interesting. Your thoughts? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking through that, CSP v3, or level 3, whatever you want to call it, as well. Like there's some new great additions to this. I mean, one of the things that was interesting is they're actually removing their XSS auditor that's built into WebKit, right? Because of CSP and COEP. I'm trying to remember what COEP stands for.
Oh, yeah. I don't remember. COEP. What is that?
Yeah. But we've said that in the past.
Cross-origin embedder policy.
Embedder?
Response header prevents the document from loading any cross-origin resources that don't explicitly grant the document permission.
Oh, yep. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just cross-origin. Okay. Yeah. So it's part of the cross-origin protections that are built in, right? But CSP and COEP prevents cross-site scripting in and of itself. Like we've said that for a long time. That initial policy that was built out by GitHub, years ago at this point, that prevented cross-site scripting from being a risk, right? Like it means that the browser developers have recognized that, and they're starting to dial back on some of those active preventions that were built into the browsers because we don't need them anymore, right? So that was interesting. Anything that helps with the reporting mechanisms is going to be great because you get so much data. It was almost like the amount of data that came out of CSP report URI had to be you had to dump it into to machine learning or something to identify anything that was really interesting to you because of the amount. That's what Neil was talking to previously. So it'll be interested to see. I think your 6 month 3 to 6 month target on that is probably optimistic, right? Just based on how long it takes some of this to actually roll out. I know people upgrade browsers fairly often, but there's still so much old stuff that's out there. I wonder how much is actually going to implement CSP version or level 3 in the next 6 months, but we'll see.
Yeah. I like this. They kind of touch on this in the synopsis or summary of this, but I like the fact that we're moving to a world where we're trying to just build security in by default for developers and for users. So stuff like this, it's awesome. I as always though, it's it's great that Apple's doing this. I hope it's a standard, kind of you see this employed in all browsers, all major browsers, because obviously Safari is statistically a smallish percentage. Depends on your site and who your users are and your user base and all of that. But so that's obviously subjective. But I do like. So a growing trend, however, is to somewhat relieve developers of such effort by creating technologies which increase security by design. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's, I think, a good trend. I don't want developers to completely lose sight of security for sure, but there are a lot of little things, nuances I wouldn't expect somebody who's trying to build an app to know. It's a different skill set. So, and finally, support has been removed for XSS Auditor, which say the developers, XSS Auditor has been removed. Support for it superseded by, Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't think there's a ton to cover here, I guess. I think we covered, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more interesting, like talking about CSP level 3 as that's getting rolled out. That has more effect than anything else. And I know that like Chrome probably already has support for CSP level 3. Oh, let's see, browser support. Yeah, that's what I wanted to see.
But I will say, whenever I talk about XSS, that's pretty much my first always go to is use CSP.
Yep.
Because inevitably XSS is going to happen. It's just the way it works. It's just building an app. You're probably going to introduce cross-site scripting. So
yeah, it looks like Chrome 59 Plus has partial support, right? Firefox, and then this version of Safari. Do we need to talk about Internet Explorer? No. Yeah. Edge.
Edge. Yeah, I don't know.
Edge has partial support as well, but I think that's because it does use WebKit, if I remember right. So it's similar to Chrome behind the scenes. So anyway, yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think that's probably about it. Use CSP. If you're concerned about cross-site scripting, use CSP. That's the takeaway that we've got on this one. Cool. All right. Well, let's see. We're running over time a little bit. Ken, any
Are
last
we doing
thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I guess we have to figure out if we're doing an episode next week or if we do the episode at the conference, like after a day of training, or yeah, I guess we'll figure that out and I guess let folks know. But I'm thinking it would be nice to be in the same room for once and just do it there. You know,
yeah,
maybe pull in one of the conference organizers to talk a bit. Maybe if we can grab some of their time.
Yeah, no, that would be great. Let's do that. So next week, plan on, if you're listening, plan on us doing an episode probably, later in the week. It'll probably be on Wednesday or Thursday evening as we have some time. We'll live stream out some of that's going on, watch for updates from KernelCon. And yeah, it would be, if you're there, you're interested, jump up and say hi. And like, we'd for sure love to have people on, Adam or some of the other organizers that are around. We could have a discussion with them as well. So that makes more sense to me as well, Ken. So we'll do that.
Sweet. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll get you more details on next week's episode. But yeah, if you're going to be in Omaha and you're going to be at KernelCon, we'll see you then. Be very excited to. Oh my gosh, dude, I'm pumped. This is our first conference back in person. So
yes,
it's going to be. I love giving this course in person. I make no bones about it. It's my favorite way to give it. So it's amazing.
Yep. It's going to be super fun. And like we said, there's a couple more seats available. This is kind of last call for it. So if you can make it, please do. We'd love to see you. Love to have you in that course, either here or at Locomocosec. And that may be a little bit more expensive to get there if you don't live in Hawaii. So this is a good opportunity, but there will be other opportunities coming up as well. So.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll talk to everybody next week.
Bye.
Ciao.